Hello there, this is Dizzy, and it's time to play some Minecraft. So today we're going to do things a little bit differently, where in the past I've mostly done Let's Plays. Today I want to walk you through some of the features of a mod that I've been working on called Coregen. Now, Coregen lets you change at a very fundamental level how ore is generated and distributed throughout the Minecraft world. And it's designed to do this in a pretty configurable way, in a fairly user-friendly way. If you're accustomed to editing config files anyway, that is also very flexible and extensible. So you can sort of add new shapes and features on the fly, and we're going to look at that a little bit. But this is really meant for people who are, creating their own mod packs or sort of public mod packs who want to change up the game a little bit. So let's go ahead and dig in. That's really terrible, into these features and see how they might be interesting to mod pack makers. To do this, let's first look, before we sort of set anything up in Coregen, let's see how Minecraft works out of the box. So I'm going to dig down a little here and give myself some night vision because we're going to need it in a second. Just do this. And then we're going to use one of the first pieces you'll probably wind up using from Coregen called, it's a command called clear. So /CG stands for Coregen, of course. Clear, and then we can give it a type of block we want to clear. So we're going to clear all of the stone within a 100 block radius of us. And this is one of those things that is important to be able to do because it lets you see what's going on and how the ore generation is working in the world very easily, because you can just sort of go down and clear all the blocks that are stone and you get a really good picture of what's happening. Now we can see here that Minecraft by default distributes the ore pretty uniformly around the world. So you see there's, little clusters of iron here and there, lots of coal around. You can look down below, you can see there's redstone. Let's see, there's got to be some lapis, diamonds, etc. So, it's pretty uniform, which means that as a player, you can just dig down into the world and you're going to find resources. And that's great when you're playing sort of vanilla Minecraft, where you don't have a good way of, processing through a ton of ore. You don't have hammers or any of the sort of tools that modded Minecraft brings us. But when you get into modded Minecraft, it makes it a little bit too easy, because all you have to do is strip mine, basically. In other words, just dig out all the blocks in a chunk and you're going to have a ton of resources. So Coregen gives us a lot of flexible control over how ore is generated, which helps offset those super powerful tools and makes things a little more balanced and interesting, depending on how you configure it. So let's go back up to the overworld now that we've seen how Minecraft works out of the box. And then we're going to switch over to an editor, and I'm going to show you how you configure Coregen to make these different deposits for you. So let me just go over to my editor real quick. And you can see here that we've got basically a blank configuration file called coregen.conf. And the first line, disable default generation, basically just says these are the resources or ores I don't want you to generate Minecraft. And by default, we don't disable any of them. So Minecraft is just generating normal ores in the normal ways. And we're going to just add to that right now. But in the future, if we want to say stop it from generating iron, we can just add iron to that list, or gold, or whatever. So there's a lot of flexibility here for filtering what Minecraft is creating. But let's create our own deposits of ore, sort of independent of Minecraft. So to do that, we add a deposits section, which is a list because you can have multiple deposits. And then within a deposit is defined within an object. So it's kind of a JSON-like format. And I'm going to give it a name or an ID. And we're going to call this one, let's just call it plate, because that's going to be the kind of feature we generate. And then the first thing that we have to sort of decide with this plate deposit is how often do we want it to show up? And we do this with a setting called chunk chance. And for right now, I'm going to set this to 50. And what this means is that every time a chunk is generated, there is a 50% chance that this deposit plate is also going to be generated in that chunk. Now, that's a lot. 50% chance means 1 out of every 2 chunks is going to wind up getting a deposit of plate in it. Now, Coregen gives us other sort of controls, but for now, this is the easiest way to think about this. So we're going to generate a lot of plates when these things start showing up. So now that we've defined sort of how often plate's going to occur, let's go ahead and define the features that make up this deposit. So our features, again, is a list. So a given deposit can have multiple features, and I'm going to show you what you can do with that because it's pretty cool. But for now, let's just create one feature. And the type of feature is going to be a script. And the file name of that script is going to be Coregen plate.js. And so what this means is that when it's determined that a plate deposit should be generated, Coregen is going to run this script called plate.js, which you can find in your Minecraft directory. And it's going to run that, and it's going to generate a feature for us using the instructions from that JavaScript. And this is one of the really cool things that Coregen brings to the table because it lets you create new kinds of features. And those could be sort of things underground and different distributions and so forth, as well as things above ground like structures if you really wanted to get into that. So we're going to generate a plate. Now we've got to tell it what kind of blocks we wanted to make it out of. In our case, we're just going to use Minecraft iron ore, like so. And there's different things you can do here, like different weightings, and you can mix and match blocks and all sorts of other stuff. But we're just going to create a plate of iron ore for now. So we've got our blocks. Now we got to tell it sort of where height-wise in the world, or also known as the Y level, we want this plate to generate. Now, the type of generation we're going to use for that is uniform, which means it's going to be uniformly distributed, and it's going to be centered at Y level 80 with a spread of 5. And what this means is that these plates will be generated centered around Y level 80 plus or minus 5 blocks in a uniform distribution. Now, obviously, that's going to mean that it's up in the air. And by default, Coregen will only place features and deposits in solid blocks. So it'll only replace solid blocks. So what we want to do is also tell it that it's okay to place it in the air. And so we give it targets is air. And, you know, if you also wanted to make something that it was okay to place underwater, you could put water in here too, or lava, or whatever else you want. But for now, we just need air. And finally, we need to tell it how big to make this feature. So this a plate is basically a cylinder, so we're going to give it a radius of 5 blocks, and we're going to give it a height of 2. And so with that, we've defined our first deposit. It's a plate. It has one feature. That is, the deposit is called plate, and it has one feature that's generated from plate.js. It's going to generate it from iron ore blocks around Y level 80 with a radius of 5, a height of 2, and it's going to generate roughly every other chunk, or a 50% chance per chunk, which means it's going to show up a lot. So we have now defined our deposit. Let's go see what it looks like. If we go back to Minecraft, you'll note there's nothing here. Well, that's because these chunks are already generated. So, there's no way to see that. But happily, Coregen comes with a feature that lets you force a deposit to generate in your current chunk. And that way you can sort of play around and see how things are working. So let's generate a deposit, CG deposit. We have to give it the name, which is plate. And we're going to tell it true, which basically just means forcibly reload all the configuration before you generate this deposit, and also recompile JavaScript, etc. And so doing that, voila, we have a plate of iron that generated around Y level 80. Let's check that. Yeah, Y level 84. So pretty much exactly where we thought it would be. So pretty straightforward. And it's pretty cool because now, and we can generate another one in a different chunk, right? Just move a little ways away. And you can see that it generated slightly different Y level, etc. But this is really cool because it means that you can edit the JavaScript on the fly. You can edit your configuration file on the fly. So for instance, if we went back to our mod, or back to our code, sorry, we could change, for instance, the radius to be 3. And then we can come back here and we're just going to regenerate the deposit, reload the config, and you can see it's now smaller. So this lets you just iterate quickly, and that's going to be great for mod pack makers or anyone defining these custom features, because you can just pop them into the world without having to stop and restart Minecraft. But the thing is that if we look sort of over in the distance there, you might notice that we have all these plates generating. And so these are the new chunks that are generating. And we can see that as they generate, they place the plates. And there's a lot of plates because we set that chunk chance so high. So every other plate is going to wind up, or every other chunk is going to wind up having a plate, roughly. So that's not great. We can use chunk chance to sort of control how often a feature generates, but it's a probabilistic approach, right? So if your chunk chance could be 1%, right? A 1% chance that your chunk is gonna get generated deposit. But it's possible, because we're sort of dealing with probabilities, that you could have two chunks right next to each other generate the same deposit, right? It's very low probability, but it could happen. So Coregen also gives us some other tools for making sure that these deposits don't wind up too close to each other. So let's go back to our editor real quick. Great, messed up the indentation. And we're going to add a new section called restrictions. And restrictions lets us control, for a given deposit, how far apart things are, what biomes they generate in, things like that. But for now, we're going to use the min deposit distance restriction. And we're going to say, you know what, I don't want to see 2 plate deposits within 5 chunks of each other. So Coregen actually keeps track of which chunks have different deposits, and basically makes sure that chunks within a certain distance of each other don't wind up having the same deposit. So even though our chunk chance is set quite high, if if a new chunk is generated, it'll check the chunk chance first, say, okay, well, yeah, all right, it's time to generate the deposit here. But then it'll check the restrictions and say, oh, but wait, there's another deposit within 3 chunks. We're not going to generate it after all. So let's see what that looks like here. So we're just going to do a CG reload to reload our configuration, get everything back up. And then let's just fly. Let's fly this way. So what we should start to see happen, this is the area that we were just in. But as we go the other way, over time, we should start to see things distribute out a little bit. We might have to fly away, though. I didn't think about that. All right, so now we're getting into chunks that were generated, and then not too far beyond that, you can start to see that the spacing, things really start to space out. For instance, these little chunks now, you can see there's 4 of them there within visual distance, but those are each about 5 chunks apart. And so what this lets you do is really make sure that if you are generating really rich deposits of something, that they don't inadvertently generate 2 right on top of each other. And it sort of ensures some uniqueness, and thanks to sort of the random factor, you can also, make sure that they're scattered evenly throughout the world. And again, like all this stuff that we're trying out, we don't have to exit the world at all. We can just, reload the config, and things just start to take effect as new chunks are generated. So that's one of the cool features for controlling how these deposits are generated. But let's say, let's say that we wanted to restrict generation of these deposits to only the mountains. So what we could do is, again, go back into our editor, and we can add a new restriction called biomes. And we'll just say mountains. And that should do the trick. Famous last words. And probably help if I spelled it right. Mountains. Maybe I should. No. Let's try. Yeah, we'll try mountains. That might not work as expected. And so let's see CG reload again. And let's see if we go forward now It might be a little bit harder to see some of these deposits since they're going to be generating. They wouldn't be generating in here because there's no air because it's too high. Well, okay. Here's an example, I believe, of mountains. It is high enough, and so if we look within 5 chunks of here, it's relatively low. We might be able to find something. I think Y level 80 is just set way too low for this. And because we're saying only in the air, it's not going to generate anywhere else. Well, yeah, this is where the restrictions actually really matter. Well, let's try this another way. Here's what we're going to do. Let's go back to our config file for a minute. We're going to get rid of our targets. We're going to let it generate only in solid blocks now. And let's put this underground. And let's make the plates a little bit bigger. So now we're saying only underground in the mountains. How about we say, well, let's just get rid of the biomes for now and try this another way because we're not going to be able to see the biome anyway. All right, so what we can do now is dig into the world. Do our reload. Oh, wait, this chunk's already generated. We got to go somewhere else. So let's just fly over here a little ways, and we should no longer see the plates generating in the air. Right. Okay, so let's go sort of right here, and let's dig down. I think I'm about to run out of my potion, and let's take some potion real quick, and do a CG clear stone 100 blocks. And what we should see somewhere in here, it's going to be Y level 20. Yep, there's one. So here's a plate. And you can see that actually part of it's been carved out because there must have been some other kind of block there and it wasn't able to generate, probably andesite or something. Oh, that should have worked though. I don't know what happened there. That's interesting. But you can see that, you know, if we look around, we should be able to find another plate in here somewhere. Yep, there's one sticking out of the wall right there. Okay, so you can see that they're still generating underground now, and they're replacing solid blocks. But, you know, this is kind of interesting that we can ensure that they're 5 blocks apart. But one of the other things we might want to do is might want to make it easier to find these rich deposits. And so this is where the ability to control different features or sort of multiple features in a deposit comes into play. So let's just park ourselves on this tree right here. Now let's go back to our config for a minute, because what we want to do is we want to define another feature that's going to be generated at the same time as the plate that will give the user an indication of where they might be able to find a richer deposit. So again, we're going to use a script feature. We're going to set the file name to Coregen, and we're going to call it cluster.js this time. Should it be cluster? Yeah, I'll do cluster.js. Our blocks are going to be a little bit different this time because let's say that, sorry, not a list. It needs to be a object. So we're going to still generate our Minecraft iron ore. And we're going to generate that, but we're only going to generate at a 20% chance in this feature. And the rest of the time, we are going to generate grass. And we're going to do that 80% of the chance. So what this is saying is that this feature is going to be composed of, actually, let's use sand. That might be more interesting. That this feature is going to have a lot of sand and little bits of iron ore scattered around. And the Y level, this time we're going to use a type called surface. So basically this will generate the feature right on the surface. And then the number of blocks that we want in this cluster, we're going to generate actually quite a few blocks so that we get enough iron ore showing up. So what this is going to do now is when a deposit generates, it's going to create an iron plate down around Y level 20, and then up on the surface, it's going to generate some iron ore mixed in with sand. That should make it sort of act as an indicator. Now, it's not going to be right above the deposit. It's going to be close to the deposit. So you'd still have to do some digging around, but that's the gist of it. So let's try this. So let's do a CG reload. And we just need to fly a little ways until we get some more chunks generating. And then we should, at some point, just got to look for sand, if I did it right. We should see, yeah, there it is. Aha, look at this. We generated a bunch of sand on the surface, and there's some iron ore sprinkled into it. Now, obviously, you know, you would want to, wow, did that replace a tree? That's interesting. Obviously, you would want to have, this is very interesting what this is doing with the Y levels. Anyway, obviously, you'd probably want to use grass or something like that if you're doing this in a certain biome. But, you know, for our purposes, this serves the point. But now what we should be able to do is dig down here. If I can get in the hole. There we go. And then we're just going to use our clear command again. And there's a plate right there. So it's kind of a nice way of having multiple pieces generate. And of course, you could also generate multiple underground features as well. You know, something else that we might want to do is instead of just having a single ore, we might want to say, well, I want iron ore 80% of the time, and then I want gold 20% of the time, or whatever. You can have as many of these as you want with different mixtures and all that good stuff. So if we let's just go back to the surface and we'll regenerate this thing again. Well, actually, we don't need to do that. We can just do oh, no, we can't do that because we've cleared it. And there's just air under there. So let's come over here and reload. Actually, we can just come right here. And just find a clear space here. And here we go. We'll just pop it right here. So we can say CG deposit plate true. And somewhere in this chunk, we should find our, yeah, there it is right there. Okay. There's some interesting stuff going on here. I need to look into that. That's a bug. All right, so if we dig in here, oh, there's some lava. How about let's go this way so we don't get on fire, huh? All right, there we go. CG clear, stone 100. Don't do 1,000. That would be very bad. And there is our plate, but here's the new plate that we just generated. So it's got a mixture of iron and gold. So you can see that Coregen makes a lot of this stuff super simple to work with. You can create different types of features, and we haven't even looked at all of them. You can mix and match blocks within them. You can ensure that they don't replace blocks, sort of non-solid blocks, for instance. Although the surface one's kind of funky. I need to look into that one because something's not right there. You can also do underwater, which is kind of cool. So we could change, let's see, well, we could just put the plate underwater, which might be fun. So you say underwater for the Y level. We don't need a center or a spread. And Minecraft, there we go. And then I can just do CG deposit plate true. Great. What I didn't think about is whether or not it would generate right in the water or not. So let's come over here. We've got a slightly bigger body of water. Yep, and then you can see the plates right underwater. So that also lets you do things like ensure that certain types of deposits only generate, you know, for instance, if you wanted to generate things in a swamp and you wanted to make sure that it always showed up underwater, you could set a Y level for an indicator deposit and then deeper down have a larger deposit, or things like that. But there's a lot of flexibility. Obviously, you can play around with it without sort of ever leaving the world. Well, I mean, you have to go to editor, there's a lot of stuff that you can do there. So that is Coregen in a nutshell. I would certainly love to hear from you if this is a mod that you might find useful. There's a lot of other mods out there too that do some of this stuff. One in particular is called COFH World, which is part of the Thermal Foundation series. I wound up writing my own just because I wanted to be able to sort of do the distance checks, which wasn't easy to retrofit into an existing system, and I really wanted to make it scriptable in a way that that I hadn't seen anybody else do. So you should check out those other mods. Some of the features I've gotten have been borrowed from there with appropriate attribution, of course, and it's neat stuff. So anyway, drop me a line if you use it, and let me know what you think. Thanks. Bye.